Hello ladies, welcome to Homemakers Radio, a place that you can listen while you work, like we did in the olden days. We used to listen to the radio while we washed dishes, and you can do many other things with this kind of video because you don't have to sit and watch anything. However, I will show you my teacup before you go and get about your work. This one is called Gracie's Teaware. It's microwave not safe, dishwasher safe only. I don't use a microwave anymore, but I really enjoy the color in this, and it has a bit of black in it. And I'm sitting in the tiniest room of the house, or the second tiniest room of the house, where I have squeezed in a single bed and some other things too. It's also an office. So I thought I would turn my camera around and let you see how I've done it up, and it's black and white toile. There's the little window, and there's the other side there. There's the other end of the bed. So that's my first home tour video for you. And so now the first thing that you need to do, we do three things here. And number one is we get our appearance ready for the home. Now, there has been naturally, from the quote, the other side, an attempt to make homemaking seem demeaning, to seem as though it is brainless. But I am telling you, there's nothing that takes more mind exertion than the home. We have been in kind of an upheaval here. That's why I haven't been able to come back to you very quickly, in that we are sorting through years and years and years of books and other things that our family and now extended family has to do, and realizing that you have to make decisions based on what is necessary, and you have to know how to methodically go through things without creating chaos in the rest of the house. And it is not easy because we don't have a crew. We just have just a few who want to do it or who need to do it. So there's nothing that takes more effort and time and good sense than homemaking. And so to prepare for that, I believe that the first thing you have to do is get dressed and get fixed up. And today I'm wearing a cape that I made. We are in the middle of winter here, and I made this cape many years ago out of fleece fabric. I will try to show it to you on the dress form on the blog. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please click the link that I put in the description box and just go listen to it over on my blog. It's so much nicer over there, and you get to leave a comment if you like. I don't have comments here. I'm making these for my blog. If you'd like to go over there, I would really welcome you there. You can see what else is going on and check out some things on other links on the sidebar. So please do that, and then I will tell you how to contact me and how to order my book if you still want it. I won't be reading from it today, but I just wanted to say I will give you some details at the end of this video if you'd like to have it. Okay, so get yourself dressed up, get yourself looking good and feeling good. Now, a lot of people feel that they are under house arrest, or they're home, and they're only home because they have to be. But many of us, life didn't change very much because we've always been home. We always knew. You get up, you get dressed, you get ready to face your day. And even if you don't think you're going to see anyone in the public, you get fixed up as though you were, because you're going to have to look at yourself. You have to look at yourself in the mirror. You're going to have to face yourself. And you ought to be happy. And so do what you can to make it a beautiful day by the way that you dress. Now, I would probably wear an apron over this if I were to wear it around the house. I'm digging a little deeper in my closet now, and instead of donating things that I don't ever wear to Goodwill, I am just going to wear them and wear them out, and even if they're a little bit more formal. And I've really been enjoying doing that, getting out some of the more formal things. So I want to just explain what my experience is. In fact, this whole video series is about my experience based on what I do and what I believe, and I don't expect anybody to copy me. and I don't demand that anyone believe this way, but maybe you could adapt some of the things if you are in need of some kind of an enthusiasm or encouragement. Maybe you could adapt some of these things to yourself. So when I keep myself together, see, this is what I've discovered. If you've got any kind of people commotion in your home, which I often do, regularly do, a lot of people in my home doing different things, and in order to keep my head together and find my focus on things that I must do, I feel that I can do better when I have my appearance taken care of first thing. I speak better. I don't feel so scattered. My thoughts are more logically put together. Maybe that doesn't work for you, but if you give it a try and then compare 2 days and see if you do a little bit better, if your thinking is a little bit more stable on the days in which you prepare yourself, take care of yourself, take care of your clothing, your hair, get a bath, start your day out in luxury, and you'll find, at least I have found, that it gives me a feeling of being put together, and it helps kind of slow down the commotion, and I'm not as distracted by commotion, whether it's too many things I have to put away or people around, too many conversations going on. It seems to control it, the appearance. So, and my step is lighter after I've gotten dressed up. So my step is lighter. I'm feeling a little bit better. Speaking of steps, don't neglect your exercise. Go to some of these sites that I use Fabulous 50s. You don't have to listen to them. You can turn off the volume and follow them, but she has several sit in your chair exercises. I like these because I'm not going to lose my balance. I'm not going to be jumping around. And I wouldn't have given you 10 cents for those chair exercises, but I started using them, and I am feeling a little bit more clear-headed, and I'm able to keep up with my housework. I would never have thought of it, but I really enjoy those. And I also like these new physical therapist type exercises where they don't wear out part of your body, like doing 10 of something. They do 1 on each side, then they switch to something else, and it's so balanced. And I would really encourage you to do that if you want to feel more alive, if you want to feel more focused. If you also, is something quite spiritual about it. It's like you've got more clarity spiritually, and if you want to read something from the Bible, it's clear, it seems clearer. So just like you, that's my experience. Maybe not, Lizzie, not everyone is the same. So the exercise, the chair exercise, if you find yourself in the morning unable to focus, and especially those of you who aren't used to being home. Now, the rest of us might be used to being home and still kind of have that every now and then. And so if you find yourself unable to focus, or you seem to be getting up in the morning, walking around in circles, not knowing where to start, or feel kind of immobilized, there are 2 things you can do. You can do those exercises, and then you can make a list. And the list should consist of what has to be done, what absolutely has to be done, what is the most urgent right now. And that's when I have my cup of tea. And that's when I feel like I'm more slowing down. The world is just buzzing around us, isn't it? The news, the media, the political unrest. That is going to be the moment in which you can get back to reality on what is really important. And your own news is the most important thing. And your good news at the end of the day should be, I got my house cleaned up. I got these things on my list accomplished and fulfilled. So if you're feeling a little bit scattered, just keep yourself together with your appearance. Just start out with appearance. Work on that a little bit. Spend a little time in the bathroom. Get up a little extra earlier just for that and look forward to it. Now, there are plenty of things on YouTube and on the web that would help you with your appearance. I know Pinterest has some things just help you to get an appearance that you like and that will help you feel more more together, to to keep yourself together and to help you feel more focused on your work at home. So now let's go over to the second thing. I say I do 3 things here. Basically, I do veer off on some things, but one would be your appearance, and I think exercise has a lot to do with your appearance. It helps you feel healthier. It makes you look a little bit more healthy. So in appearance, and then the other thing would be we go on to homemaking, housekeeping, and so I'm going to go on to housekeeping because now after you've had your appearance taken care of, you've done some exercises, I think that the homemaking doesn't seem to be as scattered or daunting, and so you want to get started on that. Now, a lot of people have commented that they're not interested in decor, and that's nice, but I wanted to tell you why I got interested in it. I got interested in it because in the 1980s there was a kind of a sales thing going around called home interiors, and you didn't have to have a wealthy house. You didn't have to have a house that was structurally correct. You didn't have to even own a house. You could put very nice looking things in your house, on your walls, and it consisted of several different kind of elements. Pictures, lighting, which would be sconces and candle holders, and greenery, and then other various textures, soft textures, or there would be wrought iron, different things like that, and they showed you how to put it together to make it interesting. And what I discovered was living in the manse or some house that was rather shabby, I could put those things on the walls and no one would notice the shabby floor or carpet, and no one would notice the peeling walls, because I had these interesting things that would distract the eye, and your eye would kind of go upward and away from all this, and many people discovered that too. And so I discovered the art of decor, but you know, it was just small things, and I know a lot of people aren't interested in it, but that would be the one thing that I found that would make me look forward to getting finished with the sweeping, getting finished with the dishwashing, getting things cleaned up, if I had to clean or wash windows or anything, to put a little delight on it, a little touch afterwards, a little vase of flowers, just a bright spot somewhere to put a finishing touch on the housekeeping and turn it into homemaking, because you'd be making a home. And so after getting my house in order, I think, what would I like? What would I like it to be if I were to walk in here as a guest? And that always, it's the pretend factor, it's the playing house factor that we learned as children when we played house. You could make it whatever you wanted just by your thoughts. But in real life, as grown-up ladies, it's fun to put it and make it into a reality. So I have thought of so many ways to make it interesting, and I get out old things. I get out things that probably I wouldn't have thought of as a decorating item, and you can too. And so the first thing I think in housekeeping and homemaking is decluttering. Go around, pick up the things that don't belong there, or put things somewhere else. That is what I do upon first thing in the morning, is go around and declutter, and then after that is cleaning. So in other words, before I wipe the table, I clear it off. Before I sweep the floors in the living area, I straighten everything out and put away things that don't belong. And so then I go ahead and sweep, and then I clean. So those two things just seem to follow one another. So think of what you would like. Think of what would I like it to be like. And don't sit there feeling depressed. Would you like to have your chair in a different place? Would you like to have something different to look at when you look out towards a wall in your living room? And Mr. S always says, whatever you want to do here, if you want to paint it, if you want to any kind of change, it's you that has to look at it. So that I will be looking at it more. So he says, make it into what you want it, make it into the color you want. And I have learned to do it in many different ways and give a look, just like you would have a wardrobe and different looks, different ways that you arrange your hair, different clothing that you would wear. I like to have a different look in the house, and that's why I've sat in this room several times to show you what it was like. You haven't seen up there yet. And then I decided I would like to change the decor a little bit. So you can do that, and it also makes the housekeeping, the actual work, the actual scrubbing and cleaning, a little bit more appealing, knowing that at the end you're going to do something that's more interesting. You're going to add something. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about a few things that I have here. One is I'm going to read to you a newsletter that I wrote, and I have said to you before about the news media. They never give you any hope, and even some of the conservative media is rather depressing, and so and the religious media sometimes don't give you any hope either. So what I think you should do is have your own newsletter. I call these commonplace newsletters because they're like the commonplace books. We just write little quotes and things. We write what we believe, and I have written a new one, and I could type it up and put it on the blog, but I don't think I'll do it. I think I'll just read it to you and give you an idea of what you can do. And what you do is you just write down what you believe, what your thoughts are, what you've observed, and anything that delights you. And so today I will read to you this. I've written half of it for young ladies and half of it for old ladies. So this is the half for young ladies, and it's called The Elect Lady, and it's my newsletter. It just has a little dip and dab of everything. And so one of the younger women asked me about refinement. Could I talk a little bit about refinement? So I'm going to read some of this to you. And so this is from the Elect Lady newsletter, the section for young ladies. And my quote today that I put on the top of it is, "Freedom is like air. You don't notice it until you are suffocating." I just thought that might be worth thinking about. Some of the commonplace things that we have in life, we don't really notice it until we need it or until we don't have it. So this is a lesson on refinement. Now refinement means you take the dirt out of something and you polish it and you show the good side of it. You dust it off. That's refinement, is to dust off your manners, to polish. That's what it really means. So this is to young women, probably teenagers, preteens, even younger, if you like. This is how I would talk to them. The importance of refinement cannot be overlooked, especially in times of distress and instability. A person who has practiced the character qualities, let me just check my sound here. Excuse me. A person who has practiced the character qualities of courtesy, and a lot of people will say that etiquette and manners are not taught in the Bible, but that's not true. The Bible does say be courteous one to another. And that's what manners is. It's just being courteous. The character qualities of courtesy, responsibility, self-control, and refinement will use them even under duress and in the worst circumstances. We all think it is permissible to behave boorishly or lose our temper or be thoughtless as long as we are having problems or feeling pressure. But that's really not what the good book teaches. How many of you have expressed with astonishment to a friend the behavior of someone that it was totally out of character with them? They just blew up at you or something. And the friend would say something like, well, they're having some trials. Look, as long as we have these deep qualities in us and we have to nurture them and cultivate them, then no matter what this personal trial you have, you don't impose a bad temper on someone else. And a lot of you know about this. You have seen this where people will break down when they're under stress and other people won't. And it's because they are keeping in mind their personal accountability to God. That is the most important thing. And so some of the things we can do to develop refinement are, and these are just a few things, it's not entirely all of it. You could write a whole huge volume on refinement. Okay, so being kind even if the news makes us feel gloomy. Now that is like a test of character, to do something that you don't feel like doing. The news gives you something gloomy, you wake up feeling very depressed because you just heard it before you went to bed, or maybe first thing in the morning you heard it, and so you tend to want to be gloomy. Your heart is sinking. But if you fight that and overcome that and decide to be kind, even if the news makes you feel gloomy, you're overcoming. You are doing something that is hard, and that also helps you develop self-control. You don't let something else control you. Allowing space, this is for really young girls, because sometimes they'll get to talking and not realize that they aren't allowing others to interact. So allowing space between our sentences to let others talk and interact. Conversation is a give and take activity. Some people don't think it is. They think conversation is they're going to tell you all they're going to tell you till they're just good and finished and not let anyone interject. And one way that people who are devious, and I'm not talking about children, but people who are devious will do to get you to leave your thoughts alone so that you cannot express your opinion, is to talk so long that you become, you yourself, the person that's being talked to, becomes so brain dead that they can't think of how they were going to interact, or what they were going to say in defense, or how they were going to tell their beliefs. So that is one thing they do, is to drown you out with constant talking. So we want to stop that with young ladies, to start out this activity. And it is a give and take activity. Conversation is a give and take activity. And this begins in the home. And you can practice this if there's just you and your daughter or son. You can practice conversation. You can interact. And also never control and never monopolize. Never dominate. Never force others to listen. But remember, you have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. Do not continually talk about your own ideas. That doesn't mean you can't, but don't continually talk about your own ideas. But be interested in other things. Don't bore others with tedious details and descriptions. Be sensitive to a person's disinterest. Signs of disinterest in your conversation may be the following. The person gets up, stands up, sighs, looks around, and tries to walk away as though they were escaping. The person looks like they don't want to continue listening. The person tries to participate and make a comment because you have gone on too long. They start to want to interrupt you and interject things. It's a sign that you have gone on too long. Young girls, try to read signals and, quote, body language so that you can tell when you need to limit your talking. Sometimes a person will fold their arms, look away, or talk over you. You see some of this in the Jane Austen movies. When that happens, be quiet. Now here's some for older women. And this is to help other people not focus always on negative things. In trying times, it's doubly important to build one another up at home and at church. There are several phrases we should not use if we want to encourage others. Okay? This is among ladies. Ladies can also, you get a good group. I've always had a very good group around me, and people have said to me, yes, but Lydia, you've got the cream of the crop. You don't know what it's like in the world dealing with other women and how they speak and some of their bad conversation habits. And of course, I draw a blank, and I don't know what to do. They'll say, what do you do when someone does this or does that or is rude? And I'll just draw a blank because I don't experience it all the time. Okay, here are some phrases we should never use with others. I'm glad I don't live in your house. My house is so much better. I'm glad I'm not in your country. My country is better. I'm glad I'm not in your church, your family, have your job. have a husband like yours. I'm glad I'm not you. The reason this is not a good thing to say is these phrases have one common theme, and that of dismissing the importance of someone's family, home, country, job, or life as being inferior. Now, you may not feel that you are saying that, but that is what it comes across as. That's so important to know that this is how it will be received. And this kind of comment is very, very rude. And sadly, and I've seen it on the comments on people's videos or people's articles. People will say, well, I'm glad that's not happening to me. It's not a very nice thing to say. It's just not nice. You could say that to yourself, but maybe not to someone else. Many older women make these cruel remarks, but they also are victims of these cruel remarks. Laugh with those who laugh. Now, this is for everybody of all ages. When home in close confinement, courtesy is high on the list in order to keep harmony with others. Some people are under the false impression that laughing is always acceptable, but there are some times when laughter is inappropriate and offensive. Number 1, when someone has accidentally done something, such as dropping something, forgetting something, mispronouncing something, stumbling over their words, or just being forgetful or seeming awkward. It is also very rude. It's very rude to laugh at that. It is also very rude and unrefined to laugh when someone makes a mistake or fails at something. Laughing at someone is rude. Laughing with someone is permissible if the other person is also laughing. The Bible warns also about silly behavior and even silly laughing that has no purpose. Now, there is a silly type of laughing that it can be very irritating, and it's one of the reasons that sometimes women do not get the kind of respect that they wish they could have, is the constant silly laughing. I don't know what to call it. It is in the Greek, I think it was called useless, shallow, kind of a useless, shallow laughter that had no purpose. It's this constant laughing. Whenever someone says something, there are some women just laugh at everything. And I think it's very important to realize that that kind of laughter is not acceptable and probably not even very bright. It also indicates that maybe they're just nervous. Now, I'm going to come back in a minute and I'm going to read you a story. So I'll be right back. Okay, ladies, today I am going to tell you how you can become a good captive. Now, I did this in my ladies' Bible class the other day, so if you were one of the persons that came, you don't have to listen to it again. And I didn't actually read very much. I just quizzed them, so I'll quiz you. And so when you think of captive, and of course you know the reason I'm doing this, a lot of people feel they're under house arrest, they feel locked down, and it's interesting about our government, the governors that have shut everybody down and then start mandating what you do in your house. Once they have put you under house arrest, then they want to tell you what you can and cannot do in your house. Soon it will be what you wear and what you eat and what you drink and who you talk to. And so I thought it might be nice for us to discuss how to be a good captive. Do you remember I believe it was the 1995 movie Little Women, which I enjoyed so much, and the March Girls, it was in the dead of winter, and the March Girls were up in their attic putting on plays, writing plays and putting on disguises, and some of them had to be a man once in a while because there was no man. And they looked out their little window, and there was a young man that lived next door, or maybe he was across the street, I'm not sure, but he lived next door, and they called him the captive because he lived in the house of an uncle or a teacher his father or uncle had sent him to, so that he could be tutored in some skill. And so he was kind of under house arrest because they called him the captive. And they were leaving notes for him in his mailbox, or vice versa, going back and forth, but they called him the captive, and because he was under this strict tutorship of this teacher who only allowed him out once in a while and was supposed to be always teaching him. And so the girls finally got him to join their acting club, and they were so glad to have him because he could be an animal or he could be a man, and they wouldn't have to do all that. They wouldn't have to put all those disguises on. But I always remembered him saying, "Oh, the captive," you know, when he spoke to them. "Oh, you're the captive." So they'd already named him the captive. So I wanted to ask you something. When you go through, let's start like in your mind's eye with, do you know the books of the Bible? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, go on and on and on. Do you know the do you know the books of the Bible? And as you go through them, those of you who are familiar with it, I want you to think of the first captive. As we go along, we'll just go in the order of the Bible, okay? All the captive type people, and I'm just going to cover a couple of them, okay? So the first one, have you thought of the first one? Let's go Genesis. What happened in Genesis, and where we experienced possibly the first captive, and who was he? Well, my ladies got it right. They guessed Joseph, and he was the first captive. Well, let's think about his captivity. He was sold into Egypt and by his jealous brothers, and when he went to Egypt, his character, even though he ended up in prison, his character came forth as something very useful and very good. And not only did he help his captors escape the famine, but he also created a situation, financial situation, and a good crop situation and storage situation that his own family could come and benefit from it. And so we discussed that at length, you know, on how had he created an enemy of his captors and railed against them too harshly, he may never have been used. We're not certain what that situation is completely, but we see some good things there. And then, as we go along, let's look at Exodus now. Do you know what Exodus means? It means exit, doesn't it? So, who were the captives? Well, it was the Hebrews. They were the captives. And what did they want to do? They wanted to go to the wilderness and worship their God. And God heard their cry, and he arranged for them to leave their captivity. And it wasn't just going to be a one-time thing to go to the wilderness to worship. It appears that in their captivity, their captors had gotten harder and harder on them, and prevented their freedom even more, which is what is happening to us. We have a governor in Oregon who doesn't want us to worship in a group together in a building, and then even if you don't worship in a building, you're still not allowed. Got all these things that you're not allowed to do. So we've decided that we're going to do what the Apostle Paul said when he was told not to preach the word in the city. He said we must obey God rather than man. So we went ahead and did that. But if you notice, they are this is how you can identify who the oppressors are and what kind of people they are. That they're communists, they're Marxists, and of course the one thing that stands between communism and its agenda is Christianity and living the Christian life. That's the one thing that stands between them. That's their barrier. They've got to get people to give that up, but we aren't going to. But so the Hebrews just wanted to worship their God and go into the wilderness and worship their God, but God made it possible for them to be in the wilderness a long time. But he did hear their cry, and he did rescue them. Moses often reminded them that God rescued them, that God brought them out of that land into a promised land. And so that's the next captives. And these captives, that's the one thing I wanted to remind you about them, is that God heard their cry. They cried out to God. So that's another thing. So that's being a good captive. You've got to talk to God. Okay, so let's go on further till we find a few more here. I'm thinking of Esther, and I'm thinking of the Jews in captivity, and how Esther was alert. She remained alert. She reported things when she saw that there was a plot going on. Did they stand around saying that this is not a conspiracy theory? When she uncovered a conspiracy, a plot, did they go and say, oh, she's a conspiracy theorist? She didn't care what they said. She was going to tell the truth and uncover a plot, an evil plot. And so she was very alert. And you can't, if you're a captive, you can't just sit around enjoying captivity. You've got to because God wants his people to be free. If you're not free and you don't have freedom, you can't do his will as well and as prolifically like he wants. So you just can't just go say, well, I'm just going to stay here until something changes. You do have to be alert. You do have to cry out to God, and you do have to use your talents and your skills and make things better within your captivity, like Joseph did. And it also helped him to gain his freedom, because he left with his family. Eventually, he was able to leave, and thought that was pretty remarkable. And his family too. Now we come to Daniel, who remember the lion's den, and he was a captive too, wasn't he? And but God helped him, and he said, if you will, he wasn't supposed to worship his God, but he went ahead and did it anyway. And so he got thrown into the lion's den. But it was shown to his captors that his was the true God. And then we have people like the Apostle Paul, which I'd like to read this to you. I, Paul, a prisoner of Christ. Now, in many situations, Paul was actually a prisoner of the government. And he said, when he wrote his letters from prison, from being a captive, he said, I, Paul, a prisoner of Christ. I find that very interesting and remarkable that he gave the glory to God for being a prisoner, because God had helped him be a prisoner so that he could use it as a chance to preach the gospel from prison. Probably wrote his best epistles from prison. And so I'm going to read to you about one time when he was in prison. I guess you would call it house arrest, because he was allowed to travel as long as he had guards with him. And he dwelt, I guess, in Caesar's house, or in a house provided by Caesar for some time, as long as he had guards and he had chains. And so I wanted to read this to you about a shipwreck when he was a prisoner on a ship. So I'm going to back up here a little bit, and it's Acts chapter 27. And Paul was with some other prisoners, and so Paul sails for Rome. Well, the way the little heading, it sounds like Paul's sailing by himself, but no, he was a prisoner. He was a captive. And when it was decided, this is Acts 27, and when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And embarking in a ship of Andromatrium, it was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia. We put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus and a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. That's interesting. He let the captive loose for a little while to see his friends and be cared for. I'm not sure what that meant. Probably he got a meal and got some clothes, or just had some luxury for a little bit. And putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus, because I made my ladies look up these words like lee and other things. which I'll tell you about, because the winds were against us. And when we had sailed across the open sea, along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy, and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days, and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, and as the wind did not allow us to go farther, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salmon. Coasting along it with some difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which there was the city of Lasea. Since much time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with great injury and much loss, not only of the cargo and of the ship, but also of our lives. Now he was captive when he did this. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul had said. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority on board decided to put out to sea from there, on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. Now when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete, close to the shore. But soon a tempestuous wind, called the northeaster, struck down from the land. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it, and we were driven along. Running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we managed with difficulty, to secure the ship's boat. You know what the ship's boat was. It's the little dinghy or skiff that hangs along the side of it, or is pulled with it. After hoisting it up, we used the supports to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus were driven along. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo. I made my ladies look that up. And on the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard, and with their hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, and he was the captive when he did this, Men, you should have listened to me, and not have set sail for Crete, and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. I love this because he gave them hope, and this is what a good leader does. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong, and whom I worship. And he said, Do not be afraid, Paul, you must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. Now you realize he was a captive because he had appealed to Caesar, and he was going to see Caesar to plead his case. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. You know, God wanted him to see Caesar. But we must run aground on some island. When the 14th night had come, we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea. About midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took a sounding and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took another sounding and found 15 fathoms. Then, fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea under the pretense of laying out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it go. He didn't want them to get out in the little boat because they would definitely perish. As day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, Today is the 14th day that you have continued in suspense, and without food, having taken nothing. Therefore I urge you, take some food, for it will give you strength. For not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you. And when he had said these things, he took bread, and giving thanks to God, In the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then they were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship, and when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. Now when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach, on which they planned, if possible, to run the ship ashore. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that tied the rudders. Then, hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the vessel aground. The bow stuck and remained immovable, and the stern was being broken up by the surf. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, and Paul was one of the prisoners, lest any should swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plans. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest on planks or on pieces of the ship, and so it was that all were brought safely to the land. After we were brought safely through, we then learned that the island was called Malta. The native people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed us all because it had begun to rain and was cold. So, ladies, there is the last captive I want to read about today. But then you can get in, you can go on further and find out more captives. Well, we think of the Apostle John, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, who was a captive, and other people in here that were captives. So today I've tried to show you how to be a good captive. And so we see Joseph, use your talents. We see the Hebrews, cry out to your God. We see Esther, be alert, and be alert to unjust things and try to prevent harm to other people. We see Daniel, who stuck to his, a lot of people under pressure will not stick to their values. They will not stick to their beliefs. They will just cave in order to be pleasers, men pleasers, please somebody else. And we see Paul, who endeared himself to his own captors, probably a lot by his knowledge and his experience and his wisdom, and they realized that he was a person of value. And so, but I still want to leave you with this: I, Paul, a prisoner of Christ. So if you feel you're a captive, just give God the glory and say, I'm a captive of God, I'm a captive of Christ. So ladies, I hope that this has been not too unpleasant for you, and that you have got a lot done, or if you've been listening, if it has benefited you in some way. Now, as I said before, you can order my book through me. You can write, you can leave, go to the donate section on the left-hand side and donate the amount of $38, and I will have a book printed up and sent to you straight from the printer. And but you have to leave in a little space there a message that this is for the book and your name and address, so that will be sent to you. Or you can email me. My email is also on the left, and give me your name and address, and I will have a book sent to you, and then you can mail me the money, and I will give you my name and address later. So ladies, I hope that this has been good for you. I know I made a few mistakes in readings about some of these characters, and so you want to maybe look it up yourself and read it for yourself. So until I see you next time, I hope you have a lovely day, and hopefully I'll be back here more. Thank you. Goodbye.